Good evening. My name is Susan Stevenson, and I'm the Chair of the Board of Architectural Review and Historic Preservation for the Village of Southampton. I'm calling this meeting on February 11th, 2019 to order. Do I have a motion to open the meeting?
I make a motion that we open this meeting of the Board of Architectural Review and Historic Preservation on February 11th, 2019.
Second? Aye?
Aye.
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 Before we begin, I'd like to make it clear that I expect that everyone, the board and the public, will speak and act with civility. Anyone who wants to speak should sign in at the front. There's a piece of paper there. And so we have the correct spelling of your name. And if you have materials to present, please put them on this table up here, facing me. I'd also like to introduce the board. To my left, Rob Coburn, Christina Redding. To my right, Curtis Highsmith, Jeff Broadleib, our counsel, Bo Robinson, Zach Studenroth, our historic consultant, Antoinette Edwards, our secretary, and Mr. Styler, our videographer. So let's move ahead. If I could first,
You want to handle the minutes?
we have to do the minutes of January 14th. Is the board ready to vote on those?
Susan, I'm not, unfortunately, just because I haven't seen them. I'm actually going to ask that because I haven't seen also, I think, some small amendments to the 28th.
Well, the 28th, no one's ready to
Can
do.
we table both of these to the next meeting? Does anyone object?
No. Okay. Okay, but I had, okay, fine, no problem. Next?
I don't have any specific concerns, I just haven't seen them.
Okay, next, signs. Ray Smith and Associates Incorporated, 78 White Street, storefront sign. Okay, let's just quickly hit one too many things on it. Is it green? No. Go ahead, your name, please?
Anthony Prudenti, I'm with North Star Signs, 30D Grove Avenue in Patchogue.
Thank you. Please present your sign.
Okay, so it's a,
Do you have a copy of the sign, or
I can give you a copy, yes.
you should put it down here so the videographer can pick it up, please?
Just face it to us. Yeah.
That's great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Charlie, can you pick that up for us?
There we go.
You ready?
Yes.
It's a 3-foot by 6-foot post and panel with PVC posts carved. The size is based on the Zoning Board of Appeals. It was reduced from 4-foot by 8-foot. The sign is to be posted 1.5 feet above grade, 4.5 feet above to the top. There's an 11-foot setback. Any other information that you need?
Well, is it the green color? Do you have a sample of that, or we should just assume that the color that you're showing us is?
Basically, it's similar to the color that we're showing you. I don't have
Okay,
an
well, that looks
actual-
different from mine, but that's okay. Is everyone?
It's basically a forest green.
Yeah, I've looked at it, and my request would be, despite what the zoning board may have approved, is that the sign across the street is 2 by 4. The green portion of the sign, the pillars are an extra 6 inches on either side, and my request would be that you match that rather than the 3 by 5 that you have. Because I think on that street, which is a combination residential and commercial, that your sign will look excessively large. So if you're willing to match the sign across the
I
street,
can't make that decision.
Okay.
But I will tell you a 2 by 4, 2 foot by 4 foot, you said?
the green sign across the street, the B&B sign, is the text portion is 2 by 4. Their pillars are, I think, 4 by 4 posts. So if you can do that, you got my vote. If not, no.
That would make this very difficult to read.
Oh,
The information that's in here and
sorry.
crush it down.
Sorry.
Anyone else?
I dispute that, because I can clearly see the B&B sign across the street. So,
What was the nature of your relief? What was the nature of your relief?
On the lettering, it's carved.
No, you said you went to the zoning board.
Oh, the zoning board, the originally proposed was 4 foot by 8 foot, and it was the zoning board brought it down to 3 foot by 6 foot.
When is the sign going to the ZBA?
That's
Yeah.
why I'm asking.
Thank you.
It doesn't make sense. What the zoning
They
board
don't do signs.
granted you relief on the size of your sign.
Size of the sign.
Oh,
Setback.
Oh, the setback.
Okay,
The
setback, that's different.
setback,
Okay.
Okay,
The setback, not the size, but the location. Is that
okay,
correct?
yeah.
Okay, so the dimensions of your sign can be in conforming to other signs in the village. You're just asking for us to grant you the relief. The zoning board didn't grant you the relief for your size. You're asking this
I
board to
wasn't the
do.
one who was at the zoning board, so.
Okay.
Sounds reasonable. Jeff, I'm sympathetic to what you say. I would just say Ray Smith and Associates is a fairly lengthy title compared to B&B. And fitting it onto a sign is a little more, maybe more difficult.
Well, at the same time, they have more text underneath in terms of what they do. They also choose to use 2 lines as Ray Smith and Associates. So they're filling up the whole sign. If they choose to do it graphically in a different manner, I'm sure it would still be legible, readable from a car driving by. And again, that street is a combination street residential, and a 3x5 is, I'm 5 feet, okay? So lay me on my side, and I know some of you would like to do that. That's a big sign on a residential street. So 2x4 is fine for me.
That sign that's there is the second sign that that property has, their main sign.
Oh, so then that even makes it less significant.
You're saying which sign, the B&B?
It's just a sign to show people that there's an entrance. That's not an identification of the business.
Well, that would
For
work
which
with
business?
that.
For this one or for
No,
B?
for B&B.
For B&B?
So that
He
actually,
has a larger sign that's on I think it's Windmill Lane.
right. So that actually runs against you in terms of my view. Then you're saying you want to make it more like an advertisement so that people could read it as opposed to a relatively
It needs to be
conforming
a sign
sign.
that's large enough that you can see. To make it just say, smaller, you're not going to be able to read it. It's not like
What's the sign?
With all due respect, despite my outburst before, I disagree entirely.
How about-
The B&B, you've got the room for 2x4. You can do 6-inch lettering, 8-inch lettering. You can change the graphics. So I really think you can create quite a readable sign in 2x4, which would be more fitting as people drive into a residential area as opposed to seeing a sign my size or Curtis's size. And I'm sorry to bring you into it. You may be taller than me.
what about,
Why don't you use an example of the property that's next door?
what, I haven't been next door, so I'm having a problem with, how about having that, I feel it is an advertising like we have been averse to, saying complete tree and landscaping services. Do we need that? Is it that billboardish to anyone here, except me?
The nature of your business is tree and landscaping?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Can you shorten that instead of the complete tree and?
Complete.
How about landscaping? Doesn't that include trees?
And
Not necessarily.
Not
Take out
necessarily.
complete. Have trees.
Trees is actually.
Remove the complete, center it.
Well, not in my book. So
Other
how are we
than that,
doing here?
The name itself, there's a lot in your name. It seems to be a name of the Ray Smith and Associates Incorporated. I think if you try to reduce it, it would be very bunched. I actually really believe it would be bunched. I think if you remove the complete, you give more green space, that would probably eliminate some of the busyness that you're probably seeing.
Well, I agree.
And it's the most billboardy word on there.
Complete.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with the sign otherwise, if they could remove the word complete, because it's a little
I would agree to that.
advertising-ish.
Would you be willing, can you mark up one? Is there anyone who did this? Are you the sign, one of you is the sign person? Yes or no?
Yeah, we can remove the word complete.
Are we ready to vote on this then?
Yeah.
Is there any commentary from the public? No. Okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve the signs for Ray Smith and Associates, subject to removal of the word complete.
Second.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. This goes back. This needs to be, wait, I have to mark it up now.
Yes, sir.
take that along with you. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Next, 71 Studio Spa LLC. Whew,
So silly.
that inky, that's paper stuff, no. Do you don't have, do you have something you can put on the table?
You too.
Great, thank you. Your name, please?
Stacy Menzer, Hampton Signs.
Shoot.
I just had a question. Where is it going to be?
It's going to be front and center on the building.
It's just right over the doorway, front center?
It
It's
is.
just that logo.
The logo is the 71 Studio Spa.
Okay. And where's the sign made of?
It's acrylic, two-piece acrylic. The top piece is going to be a silver color. The back piece, also acrylic, is going to be the blue of the studio and spa.
No lighting?
The back piece?
The lighting is already there, is existing as a gooseneck.
So when you say the back piece, because I only see this,
There's an outline. The blue of an outline is going to be a separate piece.
yeah, okay, I get it, but you're not putting any blue, it's a white board that you're putting it on that's already there.
It's not going on, it's just going on the fascia of the,
Okay,
So there's 7 and the 1 pieces are going on, and those are 2 laminates. One is, the background is blue, the front is
Right.
gray. And then letters are also going right on the storefront.
Yes.
In that blue laminate material. And it's AZAC or?
It's acrylic.
any other comments from the board?
No, I have no
Comments from the
objections.
public? Is there anyone who has objections?
No. I move that we approve the sign for 71 Studio Spa at 36 Hampton Road.
Second.
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Aye.
Next, Cheese Shop, 11 Main Street.
Seem to
Hello.
have 2 versions of
Yeah,
this.
there's 2
Yes,
storefront and window decals, right?
yes.
Your name, please?
Nikki Grossman. Nikki Grossman, I'm taking over the cheese shop
see.
effective March 1st. It's a good thing.
Okay. Yes, so do you have, oh, so you've got it down there. So this is what you're proposing?
There's,
Sign, and then
Do you have that, you want the period after it?
yes.
Oh, okay. Just checking. I was a magazine editor once. Can't help it. And it has a black outline around the white.
Yes, and it's just going over the existing sign.
Okay.
And there's the wood and the metal there, so it looks a little more antique and not so cartoonish as that rendering. So we're just going right over the existing
It
sign.
is a beautiful facade.
And what is,
And we will not ever want to change
Okay,
that.
great.
what is the material?
It's the same material, we're just painting over the sign, so it's wood and yeah.
I have no
this is the
objection.
window, and that's the,
Which are we starting with? Let's do over the door.
We'll do the storefront first and then go to the...
No, we're doing the one over the door, aren't we? That's what we're discussing.
I think it's
Does anyone from the public have any objections to this cheese shop sign over the door? I
this is
don't.
over the door. That's the
Fine,
window.
doesn't matter to me.
So
No objections.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve the over-door storefront signage for Cheese Shop.
Second.
Aye.
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 Next, the window decals. So I have,
Charlie, can you, yeah, thank you.
we have 2 versions of this in here for some reason. One just says cheese shop again.
Right, and this is the one that we would like to have approved.
And what does it say? It says,
Just a little more expression of what it is, rather than just being labeled as a cheese shop.
So from my perspective, I'm not crazy. These both show the same thing? Oh, no, there's another page, maybe. To repeat the name Cheese Shop and then put, I don't object to breakfast, lunch, and provisions, but I do object to two lines when it's a fairly prominent sign over the top. I'm not sure it needs to be repeated. Or, I just don't think both lines need to be. It starts to be too much.
And then you have it on two windows as well.
We could, I would be happy with breakfast, lunch provisions and eliminating cheese shop on the windows.
I'd be willing to say yes to that. Anyone else?
Would that be in a larger font or the same font that you have there now?
If it's in a larger font, she has to come back, probably.
Yeah,
We'd
so
have to see it.
I don't think it
Because
needs to be bigger if it's just the breakfast, lunch provision.
Okay.
I'm generally very sensitive to the comment of repeating, because I think it's a good one. In this case, there's something about it being white where it just sort of floats and, I don't want to say disappears, but it floats a little bit, so it doesn't bother me quite as much. But if you're willing to remove it and just have breakfast, lunch provisions.
Can I just say one thing as the person who's actually doing the signage here? The sign is very high up, and as people are walking down the street, it's very hard to see up there
What that is.
what the store actually is. So having Cheese Shop at the eye level, I think, is really an important thing on this store in particular.
Yeah.
Would it help to have it on the door, Stacy?
I think the door is very far back.
And it's
And
often open.
It's often open. I think that was originally our thought, and then also, again, a lot of people, especially during the season, are coming and they're really not sure what it is, because the sign is so high up.
Yeah, well, if
which
they're
is-
hungry enough, I bet they
Yes.
figure it out very
Yes.
quickly. I'm not worried about them somehow. Well,
We could also, as an option, just make the cheese shop slightly smaller
well,
to match the, or it's,
she actually does understand signs.
The lettering overall is 24 inches wide, so
Yeah.
we're not talking about very prominent lettering at all.
There's no logo or other colors either. That's
All right.
part of what
yeah,
I'm
we
saying.
tried
So
to
does
keep it
anyone
clean and
have-
simple.
I have
Are
no
you cool
objection
about
to it.
this?
It looks actually really
Is
subtle.
everyone else
Thank you.
okay?
I just don't know what provisions are.
Provisions
The
is like
retail part of
cookies.
it.
Come on.
Okay.
Curtis,
I'm sorry.
can I suggest that you come in and find out?
Oh, you're advertising, I'm not.
All right. Is there any commentary from the public regarding this window signs, window decals? No?
I'll make a motion that we approve the window decals as proposed for Cheese Shop.
Second.
Aye.
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 And good luck.
Thank you and good luck. yeah.
Thank you.
Next, written decisions. Alexander Lynch.
A decision in the file approving the application to amend the original decision of the board of November 2017. It also includes a condition, as discussed by your board, that the applicant owner make best efforts to include in the construction of the new building the items that were saved, the historic items that were saved from the original building.
And to work
Have that
with,
monitored by the architectural historic consultant to the board.
That would be Zach.
That would be Zach.
Okay. Any further comments from the board? Okay.
grateful for that condition because it was what we discussed.
Motion to approve? Oh, we have to vote. Are we ready for that?
Motion to approve written decision by council.
Second.
Aye.
Aye. Where's the original?
Aye.
I need to- Whoa. Okay, I need to record the vote. Thank you.
I'm an aye.
I'm an aye.
I'm an aye.
Ayes across the
Yeah.
board.
The ayes have it. Fantastic. Next, driveway gates, non-historic. Ocean Play LLC, 155 Wyandanch. Is this the lanterns?
Yes,
Great. Let's see them.
I think I provided the specs of the lantern. I have a copy of it.
Great.
I think that one? Yes, thank you. The great.
And your name for the record, please?
Oh, you can say it from there. There's the mic.
My name is Paulo Chue, representing Ocean View LLC. In the last meeting, the board requested that I should provide the specs for this lantern. And we went ahead and put in the plan.
So is it the lantern at the top of that page?
Yes,
Okay, and it has a 25-watt bulb in it?
the specs are here and in the plan that I submitted to the,
Okay, sorry.
it says there specifically that it will be 25 watts or lower.
Okay, great. I have no objection.
I have no objection.
Anyone else? Anyone from the public? Motion?
Make a motion that we approve the application for driveway gates from Ocean Play.
Second. Aye.
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 Thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope it won't be hard next time. Next, Vicky Gross, 126 Halsey Neck Lane, driveway gates.
David's.
Yeah, that's a good point.
They had it for the last one.
Did we have this before?
No, I'm saying.
Oh, that
for the
one,
last
I know we did.
Previous application.
I'm Mark Hirsch from Walpole Woodworkers.
Hello. Do you have an affidavit of posting and mailing for this?
Yeah.
Please give it to the secretary.
Still not. No, too high as well.
It's not in the file? No. Oh, great.
General disclosure, no.
It should say affidavit of posting and mailing on the top, like very top.
We'll check.
Sorry.
We have no standing.
What is this? No, fine. I gave him, that I was supposed to be right.
Posted, yeah. We already had one in here, disclosure affidavit. So maybe for the application.
I was told everything was here. Sorry?
He says affidavit of posting and mailing.
How about the receipt for it? Would that be okay?
No.
Is it in his paperwork here?
How about over there? Did you go through that? Or have we gone through the entire file?
Bingo.
Okay, there you go. It's like losing your keys. Right where you put them.
Was in the last place I looked.
Okay. Okay, take a deep breath and then we can move forward.
Excellent. I'm here to present these driveway gates for Ms. Gross. Anything else?
No, go ahead.
They're AZAC. They're fitting between these two masonry pillars.
Existing pillars, correct?
Existing pillars, yeah. 50% transparency, everything within the guidelines, parameters.
How did you calculate 50%? That's a lot more than I got. I got closer to 30%.
Building department said if it's an 1.5 inch picket, that I get an 1.5 inch space. I think this is even more than that, though.
Okay, what I read said 1.5 inch picket, 1.25 inch space, and there's a lot of paneling on it and the railing and the stiles. And when I did the math, which I would share with you, but I'd bore you, but I came out to about 30%.
So it's 2 3/4 spacing with an 1.5 inch picket.
Oh,
That's different from what's been in our file. We had something in the file that said 1 1/4 inch spacing with 1.5 inch picket. So what are we voting on?
This was These are my drawings. I was asked to come in this evening to present. They just bailed. So it's definitely, I had my engineers calculate this, though.
So where is the thing?
Do we have 2 copies of that?
I could show you this closer.
Do you have more than one copy of
I
that?
do. I made 5.
You are lucky.
I want to make sure I'm not, it was this is what I was looking for. This is 1.5 inch
Doesn't
square
look
picket
anything
with
like
one
the
and a
thing
quarter
he's
inch
showing
picket.
us. This doesn't even look,
It's a new design, from what we've seen.
but we're happy to look at the one that you brought,
I appreciate it.
but let's,
These are
The
standard.
spacing is more, I would say.
no
is
kidding.
different.
It's much different.
So that's a positive thing, I would think.
So this is not,
So how do we deal with, we just go with the thing he brought tonight and say this is it?
this is not an issue. So this,
So how do we mark,
Stamp
we
these two.
cross this through?
Stamp
should she
2 of
stamp
these.
them?
Yes, she did stamp 2 of them, so.
Do you have 2 stamped ones?
We do.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Here, you want to look at it?
I did have a couple questions. There aren't finials on the post right now, are there? So are those being added?
No, they're there now.
The finials are?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
All right, I don't have,
this is existing.
okay.
okay. Does anyone from the public have anything to say about these? Does anyone here have any more commentary?
The only other question I did have a question. The setback from the road is required to be 18 feet. Is that shown on a plan somewhere?
Yes, there is a plan.
It's not a requirement, Rob.
It's not?
a standardized
A guideline?
reference
And those
guideline.
posts,
Because of
those
the length of an
pla-
average truck that might be
posts are
making
The
it.
posts are from,
These are at least 18 feet
1920.
back. It's like 22 feet.
Okay, I have
Okay.
no
I just
objection.
didn't see it anywhere on a plan. We usually do,
So,
but it's not
yeah,
a
let's do
requirement.
this. Okay, I'll do it on the other one too. Great.
Okay. Then, with all of that said, I'll make a motion that we approve the driveway gates at 126 Halsey Neck Lane.
Second that.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye,
Did we ask for comment from the public?
yes,
Okay, thanks.
okay.
Good?
Yeah, we need this, to
All that
sign,
goes
they'll
back in
just,
the file.
yeah.
This,
Okay,
Thank
worked
you.
out. What can I say? Something good happened. Next,
Next is Henry and
Public-
Bernadette Watkins.
non-historic, 44 Halsey Neck Lane. Good evening.
Diana Harold, architect. We'd like to pass out the card renderings that
Okay, thank you.
as requested. These are the stamps. Yes, thank you. And we also have a color sample of the roof that's been changed.
No, there's multiple. Each one has multiple.
Your roofing.
Yeah, that's good. I think. Much better. Looks nice
Thank you.
to me. I'm only one.
We've been trying hard. We have listened to the
Yes, you
board.
have. Thank you.
But we also appreciate the recommendations, very much so.
Not everyone does, but thank you. I don't make that many.
Well, I
Count this as one.
Yeah, well, I like the gray, I like the less intense black blob of.
We're fine with it.
it's a pewter gray.
Yeah,
Well, we just gave you a
Pewter gray?
sample, the pewter gray one, the one that says Watkins.
yeah, that's
Yes,
fine.
it's got a little white in it, it's got
Yeah.
a little colors in it, yeah.
Okay.
Is that okay, or you want to see this one?
Board members? This was the last sticking point, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I'm good, and I very much appreciate the renderings, and it helps tremendously. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There are 3 different angles, so you can see the way we turned around the garage.
Yeah, yes. We were showing you that the garage door had been moved, but there's still a parking space to the side of it, on the north side.
Is there any comment from the public on this house, this plan? Board members, do you have any more to say about this? Since we've talked about it a number of times. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion that we approve the application, for Henry and Bernadette Watkins at 44 Halsey
You
Neck Lane.
might keep in your file. I think you should keep it in your file.
give some of those back.
We have 2 copies.
Do you want these?
Yes.
No one here.
That's fine.
Sorry, hold the press for a moment.
Thank you so
There's a
much.
motion on second.
Yes.
You're voting, Rob?
I think we're going to frame a couple of them.
Aye.
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 Approved.
Thank you so
Good luck
very
with your
much.
project.
Thank you so much. Whew. I just wanted to quickly add, it's kind of a funny, but I'm the historian in my family, and I was putting away some documents, and I ran across this brush. And the owner in 1926, he's related to me. So now it's made a special meaning, this house. And it's really, it's wonderful.
Except you're knocking it down.
I know. Thank you so much.
He's not around to see us, so it's okay. Next, William Pappas, 85 Hunting Street, construct pool house. State your name for the record, please.
Lisa Zaloga, architect.
Do we have the affidavits of posting in the mail? I don't,
I'm
yeah.
going to hand out the... Consideration.
So I saw that you had a variance of a couple of feet.
I did, yes. It has an 18-foot setback off the side property line where 20 feet was required.
Just wanted it on the record.
Zach, do you want this, or are you okay?
It's a pool house. Go ahead, Lisa.
This is a proposal for a pool house. It's about 300 square feet, 13'9" high. All of the finishes will match the existing house, cedar shingles, white trim. It has a hipped roof. We did get a variance. It's off in the northeast corner of the property, on a corner lot, which is the reason that we got the variance, because we have 2 front yards. So it's hundreds of feet from either. Or 100 feet and change.
It's a pool house.
It's a pool house.
Can I just ask, I drove by and it was a little hard for me to see exactly on the house, and of course this isn't here. Is the, on the hip roof, is the angle of that roof similar to or the same as the
Yes,
house?
yes,
It's the same angle?
yes,
So
it's
same materials and same angles?
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Nope, I'm good, no objections.
Any comments from the public? Please step forward, sir, and state your name.
My name is Andy Newman. I live next door to the subject property. There are a couple of things I'd like to say. One, the renderings still do not reflect the gutters that are supposed to be on the house as was required by the ZBA. The other thing I'd like to say is, as the architect noted, it's a 13 feet 9-inch height, but the property back there is elevated by another couple of feet over the rest of the property. So the mass, particularly given that it's into the setback, impacts our property. And we'd like to see that, we'd still like to see the height brought down some to lessen the impact.
Brought down from 13 feet?
It's nearly 14 feet plus the elevation of the property in the back, so it's...
Only way you do that is to affect grade.
Grade their property to put the pool house in.
No, they can bring down the height of the pool house itself. The roof doesn't have to be that high.
So you're saying a flat roof?
I'm not saying a flat roof, I'm just saying bring down the peak some.
Was this issue addressed at the ZBA?
We talked about it at the ZBA. Correct.
And they passed it along to us, or what was their...
They didn't seem to have an issue with it, but we still have an issue with it.
And the issue on gutters is that the ZBA did require gutters?
Yes, and that the water wouldn't come off the roof and go into his property.
And go into a dry well.
Yes.
I understand,
it's
okay.
specific, which I think is great.
Do we know what those gutters will look like?
Yeah, actually, they're going to match the house, which actually has K gutters on it, and they're white aluminum. And that was part of our variance, and they will be placed on the property.
Forgive me, because I didn't see it before, is that called out on the plans?
What the gutters are, it should be, Maybe it's not.
Is there any existing screening?
That was also part of the variance, that we have to fill in any of the hedge that is scraggledy. It's extremely, there's a tall hedge there. There's a lot of plantings in front of the hedge, so the hedge has not gotten a lot of sun over the years. So that's part of our variance as well. And if you do, when we discussed this at the ZBA, the reason that it really wasn't an issue, you can see the pyramid law line here, but you can also, what the ZBA took away from it was that the plate height of the building is down at 9 feet. The 13-foot 9 is at the very, very tip of a hipped ridge. So the 13-foot 9 is only about 6 feet long, and it's sloping down from that. So that was the reason that it really wasn't an issue.
So you, and not that this is the case, but you could move it, is that to say that you could have moved it west in such a way that the variance would not have been an issue, and then the height would have been anything that would have been allowable?
But isn't the pool in the way?
The pyramid law?
The pool's in the way.
I originally asked for 16 feet, and we compromised by moving it another 2 feet and got closer to the swimming pool. So I'm now 9.5 feet off of the swimming pool.
Right. No, I'm not suggesting you're doing that. I'm just saying that
we went through it all.
It could conceivably be even higher than what it is now. And the
Right. I didn't get a
ZBA is trying
variance.
to accommodate the community and you, Mr. Newman, in the sense of providing for some screening and making some adjustments.
The variance, I mean, the pool house could be 16 feet high. When I moved it closer and made it smaller, it dropped down 3 or 4 inches in height. But again, that's at the very tip of this little point that's a hipped roof. And it's not 18 feet from his property, it's more about 25 feet from his property. So
The ridge
wall,
line.
the ridge line, the wall that is close to his property is only 9 feet high.
What specifically would be the impact or negative impact if this is constructed as proposed?
Oh, we'll be staring at it, that's
staring at a roof.
one. Yeah.
So it's not windows, there's no
It's just if
privacy
they brought it
issues?
down a little bit more, if there'd be less visual impact.
But you're looking, well, I'm just trying to understand. There's no privacy issue, there's no windows leering onto your backyard or anything like that. It's
Not
just
that I know of.
you're going to see a peak of a roof.
And your house is the house to the east?
To the east.
The one that's called the Birchwood or something like that? Birchwood or
Beach house.
a beach, okay.
ECH. There's a beautiful copper beach back there.
No, okay, it is. Well, that's a rather substantial house.
Built under the height that it could have
Oh,
done.
I understand. I'm just saying that it's a beautiful house.
Well, thank you.
It's a beautiful house.
Is there anyone else from the public who would like to speak on this application? Board members? I think it's reasonable. I understand, that it's upsetting when there's a building where there wasn't one. I have the same problem, but it turned out that people built a garage so far from their house that they never use it in my case. And my guess is that the pool house isn't going to be the busiest place you've ever been either, so
I will say they're only there pretty much 2 months of the year, and the backyard is where they are the entire time.
They're allowed to be in their backyard.
Of course, but when you say that it's...
Well, but I mean, I
so busy-
understand you're upset that there's a building where there wasn't one, but the neighbors do have a right to have a pool house. So, and I think they have been accommodating. I don't want to get into the ZBA. From my perspective, I don't have a problem with what is being proposed to the ARB.
I have no objections.
Motion to approve.
Go ahead.
Motion to approve the application of William Pappas, 85 Hunting Street, construct a pool house.
Second it.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next, Carol Welsh, 340 Hill Street.
It's been adjourned
There's
until the 25th. But there's a letter in the file requesting adjournment to the 25th.
So do we have to approve?
Of course.
Motion to approve the
Make a
letter.
motion to approve the applicant's request to adjourn 340 Hill Street to the February 25th meeting.
Second.
Aye.
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 There are three, Thomas and Meredith Joyce is also, 365 Hill Street is also adjourned.
765.
Well, I think there's a letter requesting
There's a
adjournment.
letter requesting an adjournment. We're skipping over 2428 for the moment. We would like to go through the last three.
Well, you need to approve the request for the adjournment.
Okay, but I'm just pointing out why I'm skipping over. I believe that this would only take a few minutes. Is anyone totally upset about that, and Mr. Bennett?
What, the other three?
No, we just want to run through these quick ones. Yeah,
The other three, the three
Yeah.
after this?
Yeah.
okay.
So let me
Motion-
start by making a motion to approve the applicant's request for adjournment on 765 Hill Street, as stated in the letter.
Second.
Second.
Aye.
You also should note on that the village attorney has prepared a number of questions that the board had discussed with council regarding this application, and you may, if you so desire, release those to the applicant's counsel this evening for response.
Are they there?
They are in the
Do we have a
file.
copy? These are in
Yes.
addition to the ones that Mr. Coburn,
They're in lieu of.
in lieu of, okay.
I-
Cumulative, I assume.
Where is this? Is here it is. Joyce. Here it is. No? These are the.
Want to get them to me tomorrow?
They're in the file.
I'll get
We'll pick them up
a copy
tomorrow.
tonight.
We'll pick them up.
The nature of the questions is generally to establish basis, and the materials, other materials we need to understand what the return is.
Yes, let's just move ahead.
All right.
Next, Anthony Punnett, 310 Hill Street. Please state your name, sir.
I'm Anthony Punnett, homeowner.
Oh. We saw your drawings.
You seen them? You don't
Well,
need
no,
these copies?
I did. Did everyone see the drawings?
I didn't.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I saw the files, but yeah, let's go
Are
through
these,
it.
I'll take one.
are they stamped in the file? Wasn't it in the file?
If they're stamped, these are just copies?
They're just copies, yeah.
Are there two stamped in the file?
I'm not sure.
Oh, I know it was in the file.
Yes.
Yes, okay, because I saw it in the file. All right.
These are not stamped, they've got to be stamped.
No, they don't. We have two.
Yeah, because the ones we have are larger.
This one first.
Oh, no.
So we don't need,
Okay.
okay.
We have stamped plans in the file.
Can you
Rotate
turn
that,
it so
face
that
us.
it's not backwards on the
Sorry.
page? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Punnett.
How's that?
Perfect.
Great. So, you change it to brick?
Yeah, what I would propose doing is sheathing the chimney flue that you did, the metal chimney flue that I understand your concerns, you did not want to see that in this neighborhood. Sheathing it with plywood and cladding it with brick veneer. I have a sample board right here.
Well, they do it everywhere.
So to look for all intents and purposes like a masonry stack.
Is it rectangular?
Yes.
Okay. I have no objection.
And that's the color? It's that
Yeah, it would be this Danish blend.
dash blend?
The famous Danish blend.
That's right, the
It's
ubiquitous Danish blend.
Correct. Anyone else on the board? I would thank you for changing it, yes, in a moment. Any comments from the neighbors and from the public? Motion to approve?
I'll make a motion that we approve.
Oh, it has to go to written decision, it's in the historic district.
So I'll make a motion that we close this file and refer it to council for written decision.
Thanks.
Second.
Aye.
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 Great, it's over.
Thank you.
Except for the written decision. You don't actually have to come for the written decision.
Oh, good.
Okay. I don't think it'll be that controversial. Next, 131 Main Street, exterior alterations to existing commercial building. Please state your name.
My name is Brian Brady.
Mr. Brady?
Thank you for accommodating us.
Okay, well, it just seems like if Mr. Studenroth had a few comments, but you should show it to us first.
Okay.
We have the, okay, you've got that under control, so you know the routine. I can't get out there. Sorry.
Okay. There, he's out here.
Yeah, there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Brian.
Okay. So this is a commercial building that I own, and actually it's where my offices are. And right now it's configured that my offices are on the second floor in an apartment, and the first floor was retail space. And the retail space was used as an office for the last 15 years. It was a RBC Wealth Management. So in order to accommodate the real estate market right now, I've had trouble leasing the retail space and trying to get a tenant in there. So I am moving my offices to the first floor and turning the second floor into an apartment.
Fantastic.
Yeah, which would be great. And basically to accommodate that, I'm making some window changes, trying to keep as much of what's there existing and changing out the windows. So I can walk through each elevation with you if you'd like. It's pretty minor. Okay. On the front facade, which is the east elevation, nothing will change. You can see what's existing and what is being proposed. So from Main Street, you won't notice a change at all.
You're not eliminating the door?
No, that was drawn wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's all staying.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah, I saw that today. On the west elevation, which is the rear of the building, which faces the back, right now there are no windows in there. And so I'm proposing a door entrance and 2 windows on either side of it. And that's the only change on that side. On the south elevation, this is the facade that faces the CVS parking lot. There's a chimney right now you can see running up there that is, it's defunct right now. It's not being used for anything, so I want to remove that. And there's also a little window that is on the stairway there, which I also want to remove. And then in order to make the plans work on the inside, I'm adding some more windows. And then on the north elevation, which you really can't see from anywhere, this backs right up to Dunkerley's. Basically, I'm adding some windows on the blank facade to get more light into the office.
Thank you.
That's basically it.
Zach? Want to say something?
Yeah, sure. I think these changes are perfectly fine. The only thing that I was concerned about was the door facing up front, because that's kind of character defining. And there have been other alterations. I noticed in the form filled out in 1979, there were 2 posts supporting that overhang. They got replaced at some point, probably because they weren't doing the job, be my guess. The only other thing is replacing the storefront toward the front of the south elevation, storefront window with a couple of sashes. But given the scale of this and all the early fabric that you are preserving, and if you're replicating these kind of wonderful 16 over 2s, great. I think that's a relatively minor alteration, and you're taking both of those chimneys out, which are not original, and they're sort of defacing. So I think overall it's really appropriate.
Any comments?
And Brent, just to be clear, the materials for the roof and the siding, you plan to keep the same, the fish scale and
The one change is the shutters that are on there now are plastic, and they will be wood.
Oh, nice. Ooh.
No questions.
Any comments from the public? Is anyone from the public?
And it's going to stay white?
Yes.
Any comments from the public regarding this application? Board members, do you have any objections? I don't. I think it looks
There's
nice.
subtle improvements.
I make a motion that we approve the application for 131 Main Street's renovation.
Written decision.
Oh, we are, sorry, we're referring, apologize, that we refer it to council for written decision. Aye.
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 Okay.
Could be a two-bedroom? Two-bedroom upstairs?
Great.
Great. Swanky. Next. Well, someone will.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the master plan to have these
I know.
apartments, so good. Next, Shannon and Grossman, 42 Post Crossing, exterior alterations and construct detached accessory garage. And that's you too?
That's me too.
Oh, okay, well, you're gonna, affidavits are in there?
Yep.
Great. I'm gonna put this on the floor so we can get by my feet. Okay, you go back. Okay. I'll show it her.
Two of those.
Go ahead, Brian.
Should we get it unstamped?
Yeah, you have a stamp.
They stamped them all.
Oh, they did?
Yeah. I'm Brian Brady, the architect for 42 Post Crossing. As you all know, Post Crossing is a very unique street in our village. Every house on it is historic and contributing. This house happens to be right next door to my house, so it's an easy commute for me to work on it. What we are doing, the beauty of this is right now this house is of 4 apartments. It was converted from a single family to 4 apartments, and it was that way for quite a long time. So my clients are turning it back into a single family house, which is great for the street. And what we are doing is pretty much elevation changes to this. I can walk you through them. There are some photos there where you can see the front of the house and the rear of the house. Basically, there are no additions going on here. It's basically restoring the house and turning it into a single family. The only other change on the site is there's a new garage going in, and it's in a different location than the original garage.
So you're removing the old garage?
Moving the old garage. It's just going on to the other side of the property.
But is that part of this application?
Yes,
Garage
that's
is-
garage,
Yeah.
detached accessory garage is part of the application.
Do you have it here in the plans?
It's probably in the big set, sorry.
Is that contributing?
Oh, yeah.
What'd you say?
I asked if it was contributing.
Oh, this is? Yeah, all of them. Watch out for Coke, coffee, and water. Oh, I see.
It's just a simple two-car garage, with a gable front. So there are no changes to the front of the house, so you will not see any difference from Post Crossing. There are some minor window changes around the house.
Charlie, you want to shoot in there?
Which one do you want?
Show them the changes and proposed?
And then we want to hear from
But on the
Zach.
front, you're removing that glass enclosure on the,
Right, which was not original.
yeah, I doubt it, yeah.
You think?
The vestibule was coming up.
Right.
Zach?
I was waiting.
Oh, okay, are you, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah. All right, on the west side, you can see that toward the rear of the house, there are some double windows that are really not in keeping with the rest of the house, so I'm removing those and just organizing the facade a little bit more with the windows. On the east facade, I am adding a side door here and cleaning up the fenestration there, trying to organize it a little bit more. And on the rear facade, I'm cleaning up the back here where there were 2 entrances to each apartment, and now it's becoming sliding glass doors out to the backyard. The other change is the chimney now is on the exterior instead of in the center to make it work better with the plant inside.
So, a couple things. As you've noted, that kind of storm window enclosure in the front has become a permanent feature of the use. But concealed behind it is the original door and doorway. And you show that in plan, but not in elevation. So sheet A2 shows the front door opposite the steps coming up to the porch, flanked by narrow side lights, which are 4/1s. You don't see these from the street because they're behind that glass. But that's the original doorway with those side lights. And it's a glazed door, the panel is typical. So I'm only saying that when we go to sheet A5, the door is there, but the side lights have disappeared.
Right.
So they're going to stay?
They're going to stay.
So the side lights are going to stay.
You
Maybe
say
we
so.
need to note that in the drawing.
Yeah.
It's just something that was omitted.
Yeah.
I think what explains what's going on in the back is that was a two-story porch, which is now supported on cement block. And that was a whole later construction to enclose
all the way
that.
out, too.
2 stories.
Yeah.
So all those little funny windows that don't match all the rest are on the back. So you're kind of bringing them up to date. The only other change is the chimney, and I don't know how you feel about that, but houses of this period and most historic periods have their chimneys, at least in this neck of the woods, inside the footprint of the house, as this is, and it's the original chimney. So, evidently your architectural program to maximize on the use of the space and all the rest of it is to take that chimney and put it outside. There it is. So I rest my case. That's.
Could the chimney be inside?
We don't
If you
want it to be,
moved-
because now it's
If
occupying.
you look at the plan,
Yeah, it would
That
go
will
through
go
this.
through.
I get that it would be
So-
sitting
I
in the
tried,
wrong
believe me.
place. Okay.
I would say on balance, given all the other changes and how much of this historic house is being left intact and very beautifully handled in terms of your window sashes and all the rest of it, that's just one little thing of mine. But I don't think it's a major thing. I think you just have to look at it aesthetically. How does that, change that west elevation? And if you don't feel that it's aesthetically a big element, I wouldn't advocate changing it. Just wanted to bring that to your attention as something to this. I think it can be whatever your judgment is. It's not a major change.
Okay. Considering it.
Just wanted to note it.
Board members? I think it looks a lot better with those little windows and all that stuff gone.
No, absolutely.
I never knew that was all apartments. Anyone else?
No, I'm so delighted to see this lovely house restored.
I would just say I share Zach's concern on the chimney. I'm a little more concerned from the north elevation than the west elevation. But you won't see it from a very far distance back, given the street. It's going to have some landscaping, and it can be removed if anyone ever decides
Right.
that it was ugly and shouldn't have been there. So on balance, I would agree with Zach that this is a nice combination of preservation on balance. No problems.
Anyone in the public have any comments on this application? Any neighbors? No?
I'll make a motion that we refer, that we, that's the word, that we
Close the matter for
close the
decision.
matter for written decision by council.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Want some of this stuff? Okay. You sure? Okay.
Won't go down if someone's broken it.
All right. Okay, now,
Got to take a moment.
okay, Rama, okay. Tell me when.
Sometimes cooperate, and sometimes they fight.
Oh, don't even, the thing is so rickety, that one bin. Next, 24, SH24 LLC, 24 Gin Lane.
The applicant, John Bennett. With me this evening is the project architect Tim Haynes, Grant Wellman from Aries Design, Joel Snodgrass, our architectural and historic consultant Lisa Poyer from InterScience, and my client is here as well. Let's say that he's here, as he was the last time, Scott Schleifer. So we pretty much put this case in the last time, 24. This is the guest house, de facto guest house. But there is one thing we wanted to bring to your attention. After the last meeting, we did receive a copy of a letter from the owner of 6 Fairleigh, Donald Quinton, that was stamped in on February 4th to the building department. And we did respond on February 5th to that letter. Interestingly enough, we in conversation with Mr. Schleifer, he actually very much likes the construction that's going on 6 Fairleigh, and thinks it's very appropriate. We're saddened that Mr. Quinton didn't share the same view on our house. One of the things that he did say, what Mr. Quinton objects to, he says that the 24 is inappropriate in terms of height and scale, and that the roof line drops down to the first floor, and he thinks that's inappropriate. So I just want to tell you a little about 6 Fairleigh in relation to 24 Gin Lane. And I think, from my point of view anyway, the comparison sort of takes the stuffing out of Mr. Quinton's concerns. Mr. Quinton's house and his wife's house was approved in one night without reference to the to Mr. Studenroth. It is a house on 39. I want to make sure I have this because I put this all in a letter, but I want to make sure that it's a house of on a house of 37,000 square feet, a lot of 37,000 square feet. The house is, Mr. Quinton's house is 37,000 square feet. And it is, one second, I want to make sure that I have this, pardon me, I had, since my focus was primarily on the other house. Yes, thank you. So Mr. Quinton's house at 6 Fairleigh is a 5,906 square foot house, 57.7 feet above sea level. It's shown on the aerials that are part of the application. And it's on a lot of 37,312 square feet, contrasting Mr. Schleifer's proposal at 24 Gin Lane, where you had previously approved a house in excess of 9,000 square feet when Mr. Bialski owned it. Mr. Schleifer's proposal on 24 Gin Lane is for a house on a lot of 120,000 square feet, over almost 4 times the size of Mr. Quinton's house, or certainly 3 times more, for a house of 5,066 square feet. That's 52 feet above sea level, 5.7 feet lower than Mr. Quinton's house, which we like the architecture of. So clearly, I'm sort of scratching my head as to why Mr. Quinton would object. He has almost a 6,000 square foot house on 37,000 square feet. We're talking about 66 square feet more than 5,066 on a 3-acre lot for 24 Gin Lane, a house that's 5.7 feet lower. And interestingly enough, Mr. Quinton's house was approved in one evening. Certainly no objection from Mr. Schleifer, because we like the house. Just wanted to bring that to your attention. That's all I have for now.
Thank you.
Did you want to say something now? Yeah, sure. Did you want to make your comments for 24 and 28?
Yeah, on 24.
Really keep them separate.
Okay, totally. On 24, I really liked Quinton's house.
Mr. Quinton's house has been approved,
I know,
so we don't have no jurisdiction anymore over it, Mr. Schleifer.
And I reached out to Mr. Quinton to try to understand what the problem, what he did not like about the house, and I did not get a response. And I just wanted to make sure that you are all aware that listening to my neighbors is something that I have done for the last a little over 3 years now. And that when we have listened, we have tried to make material changes in order to make sure that they were okay. And it's difficult to do that on the 24 property when they will not return your call, or in this case, 2 calls. And so I didn't want to be rude after 2 messages, but I don't have any color other than a recently received letter. And I have not been able to get any other further color. But I am listening, and I'm here tonight to listen further.
Thank you. Any comments?
Good evening, members of the board. Richard Handler, 50 Broadway, Amityville, for several objectives. We have for you this evening Michael Goldblum, a historic preservation architect who would like to make a presentation with respect to both 24 and 28. We'll attempt to limit the initial comments to 24. I would submit a resume for Mr. Goldblum. But in doing so, I would like to just highlight a few elements of his background for the board and the public's attention. Michael holds a Bachelor of Arts, cum laude, in architecture from Columbia University, as well as a Master of Architecture from Columbia, where he served as a teaching assistant for Robert A.M. Stern during his tenure. Michael is one of 12 commissioners on the New York City Landmark Commission, and in connection with that service, he engages in weekly public deliberations regarding appropriateness of developments within historic districts, the creation of new districts, and landmarks. He serves on the executive committee and is a board member of the Historic House Trust. This board is, I'm sure, well aware of that august body. He's a member of the advisory panel of the New York City Department of City Planning Special Natural Area District Advisory Panel, where he makes recommendations to the city regarding aesthetic considerations. He's a board member and fellow of the Municipal Art Society of New York, another august body engaged in city preservation. And I'm only highlighting the most current and major elements. The rest of these are on the resume for your review. From 2016 to present, he's a member of the Society of Architectural Historians, a member of the New York Landmarks Conservancy. 2000 to present, a member of the American Institute of Architects. From 1987 to present, a member of the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards. And in addition to that, Michael has also served as an adjunct professor at the State University of New York, teaching architectural history. And with that background and the other items set forth on the resume, I'd ask that this board accept him as an expert. Thank you. Mike.
Embarrassing. Okay. Hi. Thank you. If it's okay, I'll read this. It'll make it go faster.
Okay.
And I'll diverge when necessary.
State your name.
My name is Michael Goldblum.
Thank you.
It's the first thing on my paper.
Okay.
I'm an architect based in New York City. Thank you for giving me the time to discuss the design for 24 Gin Lane. The proposed development is comprised of several elements: a 5,066 square foot two-story guest house, a tennis court with a 128 square foot pavilion, and a serpentine driveway and parking courts for 9 cars. On this board, you can see the position of 24 Gin Lane relative to the other houses on the block. The siting and orientation to the street are 2 explicit criteria stated in the code and guidelines for consideration by this board in determining appropriateness. The guest house siting is anomalous for the block and for the section of Fairley Road to which it abuts. Most of the houses are oriented orthogonally to the north-south property lines. Not all, but most. This house is set at a 45-degree angle to that orientation. The tennis court and pavilion echo this orientation, as you can see here. This rotated series of volumes would be perceived as random in this context, presenting an oblique angle to the street instead of an orientation addressing the street more directly. A 50 by 60 paved forecourt accommodating 5 cars is proposed in front of the entry portico on the northeast front facade. Another 40 by 50 parking area for another 4 cars is on the southeast face of the building in front of its garages. Since this is a guest house, we would suggest that the front court overly aggrandizes this modest outbuilding and needlessly increases the amount of paving. The style of the house is an amalgam of shingle style, arts and crafts, and Renaissance, French Renaissance, maybe chateau style. That might be a bit grand, but the roof form and the symmetry and the formality of it suggested that, to me anyway. The cedar shingle siding, white painted trim, multi-light windows are all elements of the shingle style, the most popular historic style in the district. But the highly symmetrical elevations and very simple hipped roof with symmetrical flanking wings suggest a French Renaissance chateau. This house is one of an ensemble. The first building seen on the way to a larger new house at 28 Chin. Even though this board is, for administrative reasons, considering the 2 houses independently, the applicant would acknowledge that, in fact, the entire 2-lot complex is being developed as a grand estate, one of several on this block and in this historic district. In many such estate designs, the outbuildings are designed to architecturally complement and derive from the main house. Here, the symmetry, hipped roof form, and relatively low window-to-wall ratio of the guest house is much more formal than the asymmetrically massed main house with its distinctive half-timbered gables, mix of materials, varied windows, and picturesque roofline. We would suggest that the board consider these comments in developing its own views regarding the appropriateness of the design. Specifically, we would suggest that the board recommend that the guest house be rotated to align with the predominant north-south axis of the majority of homes in the area, that the quantity of paved area be reduced by eliminating one of the 2 parking courts, and that the roof lines, design vocabulary, and materials palette be revisited to bring the guest house into a closer architectural relationship with the main house. Thank you.
Further, with respect to 24, we have a historic preservationist, Misha Hunter Burkett. I submit her curriculum vitae to the board for the board's review. And as we did with Michael, notwithstanding her very substantial qualifications, I would like to point out a few elements of her background. Misha holds an advanced certificate and a thesis from Columbia University Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. She has received a National Endowment for the Arts a Rome Prize Fellow in Historic Preservation from the American Academy of Rome, a Master of Arts in Art History from Rutgers University, and a Bachelor of Arts with honors from Queen's University in Ontario, Canada. Misha is a senior preservationist since 2008 with the New York City architecture firm of Lee Saltzman Architects in New York City. From 1998 to 2006, she served as a consultant, full-time consultant with the New York City Landmark Commission, engaging in design and regulatory review. And just to point out a couple of her engagements, she was the historic preservation consultant for conceptual and schematic design in connection with the new museum at Liberty Island for the Statue of Liberty. Quite interestingly, today is the opening of the Bayonne Bridge. So for those who commute, this is a good day. She was the historic preservation consultant in connection with that project to raise the roadway for navigational clearance. The preservation consultant for renovation of Newspaper Row, owned by Pace University in New York City, for the Coney Island steeplechase, and for various private residences along Fifth Avenue in Greenwich Village, East 90th Street, etc. And I particularly asked the board to pay attention to the various professional service committees and affiliations contained on the last page, as well as her select publications, in particular regarding sustainability of historic preservation towards a holistic view, a contributor with the University of Delaware, and another interpreting the past, the future of heritage, in connection with a Elaine International Colloquium in Ghent, Belgium. Her background is quite extensive, and rather than go on and on, I call her up to present to the board, and I ask that the board accept her as an expert. Thank you.
That was equally embarrassing.
State your name, please, for the record.
Yes, my name is Misha Hunter-Burkett. I have copies of the handouts. Can I give them to you? I'm also going to ask if I can read my comments, because I think that that will be a little bit quicker.
Whatever you feel you should do.
The only thing I would ask, Misha, just speak up just a little.
I'm going to try.
Okay, I know it's not your style or nature, but it would help me.
Yes, yes, I'm going to try my best. So first, I understand that this has been a prolonged matter, but I really appreciate your willingness to hear my comments before the board this evening. I just wanted to speak to my understanding of the project, in that, you know, as a preservationist, what I always try to do is have a sense of the project understanding first, then the historic and the current context before I can proceed on with any comments with regards to appropriateness. So if you can just please bear with me as I just mention these as briefly as I can. First, it's my understanding that the single owner controls both contiguous lots at 24 and 28 Gin Lane, that both lots are currently vacant, that both lots are single and separate, and that no merger is proposed, that both lots will be served by the same driveway accessed from Gin Lane, and that the overall development of the main house and the guest house, the pool house and the tennis pavilion, as well as parking areas and driveways, will serve a single family. That the board previously issued a certificate of appropriateness, or COA, for 24 and 28 Gin Lane in 2017, at which time the board determined that a COA could not consider a design's mass, size, height, or other bulk-related standards. That the board's...
That's not true.
That is not true. Okay, please forgive me. That the board's COA was overturned as a result of the New York State Supreme Court decision, which clarified that the Board of Architectural Review and Historic Preservation may consider size or scale of the proposed dwelling.
Not true either.
Mr. Robinson, can we have our witness testify without you interrupting?
Please tell him not to interrupt. I've been quiet. Please tell him not to interrupt.
If it please the board, can we ask that this witness be allowed to present, and then council can comment and Mr. Bennett can comment when she's through. But this interrupting her, it's not something that's done.
The protocol of the meeting.
I'm making a request to the chair.
Does we know all this? We actually know all this.
It's not up to us to tell them what to say. We have to let people...
But I'd like not to hear on 28 right now, for instance, because we're not talking about 28.
There's going to be some overlap.
Oh, I objected, and you said you wanted them bifurcated. Good for the goose. Stop.
I'm not going... They are...
My only request is that the witness be allowed to... We could just have the witness testify, and then comments can come afterwards. There's no reason to disrupt her.
Go ahead.
We're instructed by our council. That's where our directive comes from, so.
I think the
our
chair
council-
sets the rules for the procedures.
You say so.
I'm making the request of the chair. I mean, we've seen counsel for the applicant stand next to his witnesses and interject, and we find it confusing and it makes it difficult to follow. I'd like to just let these experts say their piece, and then afterwards we can have a debate about what the decision has to say. I disagree with what Mr. Robinson just said about it.
Let the witness not comment on what the decision says, Mr. Bragman.
She's perfectly entitled to comment on
But
it.
I'm perfectly entitled to correct her if she's wrong.
I'm happy to withdraw my statement if I was in error.
I understood you. Thank you.
I'm happy. What I just love to.
I don't believe she is wrong in what she said. And I litigated the case so with Mr. Handler. So just let's have her continue, please.
Thank you. Okay. And finally, that the board is now reviewing the current applications for 24 and 28 as separate applications and seeks to act on the application for 24 before acting on the application for 28. In an attempt to present my comments for 24 Gin Lane first, please bear with me, as my understanding of the site's history and the current context includes both 24 and 28 together. I've tried to bifurcate my comments accordingly in respect of the board's protocol. But again, I ask for your forgiveness in advance since there may be some repetition of what I'm going to say. And the purpose of my testimony before you this evening is to give you my preservation analysis that explains historic context and current site of the proposed development and argue with regards to the appropriateness or inappropriateness of the proposed development of 24. So the maps that I wanted to share with you this evening were previously presented by Mr. Snodgrass for the developer of 24 and 28. So I just wanted to walk through those quickly, but to give my observations of these maps. The first map is the 1894, so I have this map here, and then I also zoomed into it as well as Mr. Snodgrass did. What the map shows to me are generously sized lots near the ocean with relatively small residential construction, including the small house on what is now number 28, set back both from the public streets and from the ocean. When seen together, the placement of neighboring homes appears to be staggered. Another way to talk about the staggering of houses is to say that the map illustrates the breathing room that existed between each residential development, clearly separating each house from its neighbor. The Architectural Design Guidelines Principles of Historic Design for the Village of Southampton note that, I quote, early 19th and 20th century builders and architects maintained a basic respect for their surroundings and for historic continuity, end quote. The guidelines principle of siting for historic design describes, and I quote, historic architecture as respecting the relationship of buildings to the street and to each other. They do not stand at an arbitrary angle to obtain a better view or to be invisible from the street. Instead, Southampton's historic district retains a regular setback and regular spacing to preserve a sense of visual unity, unquote. The late 19th century development of Fairlea is also shown on this map, including Ingleside at 36, Clovertop and Wild Rose at 3 and 4 respectively, Overlook at 12 Fairlea, and Fleur-de-Lis at 8, all of which are contributing structures in the village's historic district. I'd like to move on to the 1916 and 26 maps. So this is the overall of the 1916 and a detail of the 1916. And then the 1926 overall with the details. I don't know if you can see both of these. These maps show subdivisions of lots into smaller parcels and an overall increase in the building activity since the 1894 map. The relatively small residences are still set back from the streets on generously sized lots. In some cases, it is possible to see dependencies or accessory structures, as well as the larger main house on a single lot. In all cases, the accessory structures are smaller than and deferential to the main house. Currently, the area around the proposed development includes several historic properties, including the Woolden Manor, which I have a historic view of this pool house that was subsequently modified into residential after a subdivision. The Fairlea development is a historic view, and then a view as we see it today. The Fairlea cottages, including, and this is a view circa 1910. These are all from that wonderful book on the cottages of Gin Lane, which I found very instructive. This is the Meadow Beach at 48 Gin Lane. By the Way at 55. The Edgecombe at 72. And I also wanted to note some of the recent construction, particularly 22 Gin Lane, designed by Mr. Stern, and also the view of number 6, which the construction is underway. While the Fairlea houses present the appearance of greater density in the block, the overall impression is one of large houses set back from the street. The residences are generously spaced from and staggered in their siding, giving each other ample breathing room. With regards to 24, and I'm going to include 28 at the same moment, just to understand the actual site development. I feel that it's important for the purpose of context and for the record, and is particularly relevant here since Mr. Schleifer's lots occupy this proposed site. The 1894 map, which I previously showed, illustrates the diminutively scaled residence of Dr. Thomas called the Dunes that occupied the 8-acre lot. Subsequently, in 1900, Dr. Wyckoff purchased the northern half of the Dune, Dr. Thomas's property, and commissioned a new home called the Wyckoff Cottage, designed by John Stuart Barney and Henry Otis Chapman, who were active in partnership 1892 to 1908. Subsequently, the property was sold to the Donahues, renamed, remodeled, and then auctioned in 1937. My understanding is that the large house was demolished in 1941, and that a 5-acre parcel from the 16-acre estate was subdivided, and that is now the current Woolden Manor. Further, that the 1978 New York State Parks and Recreation Division of Historic Preservation Building Structure Inventory Form for 28 Gin Lane noted that the site consisted of a brick and half-timbered house and garage on an open lawn with a privet hedge outlining the drives. The remaining cottage on the site was approved to be demolished in 2015, resulting in the vacant lots at 24 and 28 Gin Lane, which we see today. In making my appropriateness and compatibility arguments this evening, and in the board's own appropriateness and compatibility determination, the board must find new construction to be compatible with the character of nearby properties in this historic district. I would suggest that the proposed new development, both at 24 and 28, is neither compatible with the character of nearby historic properties nor with any recently constructed properties in the district. As per the National Register nomination for the Village of Southampton Historic District, the district's authenticity of place is rooted in character-defining features, and I quote, "The district retains a cohesive, uniformly picturesque historic setting. Each residential neighborhood has uniform setbacks and generously planted landscape lots, and conveys an overall uniformity of building materials. The majority of residences are wood frame and are sheathed in clapboard and/or wood shingles. The summer colony typically consisted of a large, handsome main house with dependencies such as cottages, garage, and supporting buildings, and a large, generously landscaped parcel," unquote. In making its determination, the board must find 24 Gin Lane to be appropriate in its general design, character, and appropriateness, scale, and siting, both in relation to the property itself, surrounding properties and the neighborhood, and visual compatibility. I would submit that the proposed guest house is not appropriate in its general design or character. Dominated by a massive roof with overly complex roof forms and anchored by multi-car parking lots to the east and south. As my colleague Michael Goldblum has described, the guest house design is a combination of shingle, arts and crafts, and chateau-esque styles. It is highly inappropriate in its scale at a two-story, 5,066 square foot guest house. Even from a qualitative assessment of other accessory buildings at 12 Fairlea, 56 and 104 Gin Lane, the proposed guest house at number 24 has a larger footprint and is not visually compatible with other nearby properties. I'd like to move on to the architectural design guidelines. As the board is aware, its determination of appropriateness is also informed by the guidelines. In addition to the issue of scale, other design principles critical to evaluating the proposed guest house at number 24 include siting, orientation, landscape treatment, and outbuildings. The guidelines principle of siting bears repeat mention here as a reminder of the historic context where number 24 is proposed to be developed. And I quote, "Early 19th and 20th century builders and architects maintained this basic respect for their surroundings and for their community." I would argue that such cannot be said of the proposed guest house at number 24. For both the guest house and the main house, the guidelines principle regarding orientation is particularly relevant to consider here. The guidelines note, and I quote, "Most buildings in the village are oriented to the public street or the road rather than oriented inward. This is even true of historic properties along the beachfront. I can appreciate that the applicant wished to maximize ocean views for their home and so made a conscious design choice to situate the guest house in a manner that was closest to the street. However, the applicant did not orient the guest house exactly towards the street. Instead, he chose to skew it on a 45-degree diagonal, perhaps to maximize other views. Of the 18 extant structures in the vicinity of Gin Lane and in the block bounded by Gin Lane and Little Plains Road, we can find only one other example with a similar diagonal rotation, and that's at number 44 Gin Lane. All other houses and dependencies are orthogonal, which in this context is an orientation either towards the street or to the ocean. The The diagonal orientation of the proposed guest house at number 24, with its two-story volume and complex roof, neither facing the street nor the ocean, will be highly anomalous and at odds with the context of nearby properties in this historic district. Third, with regards to landscape treatment, the guidelines direct the avoidance, and I quote, of extensive paved areas such as patios, terraces, and multi-car driveways in place of front lawns. Limit paved areas in front yards to walks and well-scaled driveways. The applicant's design for number 24 employs extensive amounts of pervious and possibly gravel areas for multi-car driveways and parking lots on the proposed front lawn area. The multiple curvilinear driveways are not well-scaled or comparable with other residential properties in the district. As Mr. Goldplum has stated, the front court is an unnecessary graveled area that needlessly increases the amount of paving. The proposed plan's excessive use of paving or gravel is arguably non-compliant with the guidelines. The guidelines also state, and I quote, new outbuildings such as pool houses, garages, sheds, and gatehouses should adhere to the principle that they are secondary structures and should never overwhelm the main building or call overt attention to themselves. The new outbuildings should generally be located to the rear of the main building or at a less conspicuous location.
I'm sorry, what outbuildings are you talking about? You've lost me.
I'm sorry. With regards to outbuildings, so here this is a dependency structure, the guest house, to the main house.
We're just talking about 24 Gin Lane.
Yes, yes.
Are there outbuildings on 24 Gin Lane?
24, they're proposing the guest house and they're proposing the tennis pavilion as two dependencies to the main house on 28.
Okay, but for outbuildings on 24, you're talking about the tennis pavilion related to 24 Gin Lane?
No, I was talking about both the guest house and the tennis pavilion as dependencies to the main building on 28. I would argue that the guest house is the first dependency that one will see when approaching the main house at number 28 from the same driveway. Dependency buildings ought to be deferential in scale and design to the main house on the site. They are not conspicuous and do not compete with the main house. Examples of carriage or guest houses in the district that demonstrate this deference include those at Overlook, 12 Fairley, the Halcyon Lodge at 436 Gin, and Bonito at 466 Gin Lane. The applicant's proposed site plan calls for multiple outbuildings, including this guest house and tennis pavilion at 24. Contrary to what the guidelines recommend, the proposed siting of the guest house will not be at the rear of the house. It will call attention to itself. I submit that Mr. Haynes' proposal contravenes the guidelines. In sum, I would posit that 24 Gin Lane is inappropriate as new construction in the context of the historic district based on inappropriateness of scale, design, character, orientation, visual compatibility, siting, and landscape treatment. It is not compliant with the criteria for appropriateness as outlined in Chapter 65, nor does it conform with the principles for new construction as outlined in the guidelines. There is nothing to preserve on the site of either 24 or 28. However, what needs to be preserved and carefully responded to is the historic context within this historic district. As a preservationist, I have been guided by the founder of Columbia University's preservation program, James Marston Fitch. Mr. Fitch was the antithesis of a freeze-it-in-amber sentimentalist. No one is arguing here against development on the vacant lots of either 24 or 28. We simply urge the board to adhere to its mandate to ensure harmonious, orderly, and efficient growth and development, and direct the applicant to revise their design to better conform with the appropriateness criteria. I would also say that since 24 is to be considered single and separate, at this time, it is defined in its role as a dependency to the main house. However, at some future time, this guest house could be sold and could be an independent property rather than a dependency to number 28. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Can I ask a couple questions?
Sure. Go ahead.
Can we get written comments or a written copy of those comments that you've read to us for the file?
I would be happy to provide a written report. I was engaged rather recently, so please forgive me. I have writing all over them, but I'd prefer to have something more polished and submitted to you if the record would remain open.
Could we also get, is a written copy or a report, Mr. Goldblum, for your materials that could go into the record?
I'm in the same book, even though I was retained.
Could you go to a microphone?
Sure. I'd be happy to do so. I don't have copies with me tonight, and mine also has chunk on it.
You
so.
could email this stuff to the building department.
Absolutely. We'll do it right away.
If there's a time sensitivity here.
Yeah. And I'm sorry.
Tomorrow afternoon or Wednesday,
Ms. Burkett, I did have a couple other questions for you, because I want to make sure I understood some things that you said.
Please.
You talked about most houses in this area being orthogonal to the streets. Is it also fair to say that most of the houses in this district are orthogonal to their lots? Or say it another way, are most of the lots in this district orthogonal to the street?
You know, I hadn't considered that, actually.
Okay.
I would like to think about it.
Okay. If you have any comments on that, I'd welcome them. You mentioned setbacks, that I think on a couple occasions that the setbacks are different, or implied that they were different for this house. And I just wasn't following. How are they different?
I think what I was speaking about, correct me if I'm wrong, I
don't have a written copy,
no,
so I was trying to take notes.
No, it's okay. I think what I was speaking about was the staggered appearance of the different houses on the properties. When I was looking at the 1894, 1916, and 1926
You
maps.
made a couple comments that the setbacks were different on this property, and maybe I'll look at your written comments if they're in there, and that'll answer it.
Sure.
You also talked about excessive use of gravel. Can you give me or this board a standard you would recommend we use for what is an appropriate use of gravel on a property?
What I was looking at was just not a quantitative, but just a qualitative assessment, looking at aerial maps, aerial photos at Google, and the maps that I had seen, and looking at the amount of paved area. My understanding from the plans is that Mr. Haynes has referred to it as pervious. But I don't know if that's gravel or some other material. It's just that the amount of all of the driveways and parking areas, in my view, were excessive, and also seem to be in somewhat contrast to the guidelines.
Excessive relative to other houses, or to the house itself?
Yes, to both to the house itself and also to the other houses within the block. I was looking particularly within the block. Does that satisfy you?
Thank you.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
You referred to 24 as in outdoor, I'm assuming you meant like an accessory building based on the fact that you're assuming it's a guest house to the main home. You're taking in consideration the entire estate.
Yes.
However, because these are two separate parcels, which even you said at the end, could be sold at separate times, we should identify 24 independent of 28.
Yeah, I must say, I mean, looking at the plans, that it was labeled as a guest house.
However, if ever in the future they decide to take and separate the two and sell 24, it still stands on its own merit, correct?
Correct. Well, and that's the question, whether or not it would be considered appropriate
Then it wouldn't be an outbuilding, it would be just an independent.
as its own independent
It is
building.
Principal structure.
Yeah, it's, because it's on its own lot, and the fact that you could then sell it,
Yeah.
that is her, I believe.
But
that is the point that
You were taking in consideration
you
dimension, size, and features.
And
based on
also
the
the
fact that and orientation, okay, based on the
Orientation.
fact that it's the sum of the whole rather than just an independent structure. So therefore, independently, if the other house did not exist, would it be appropriate?
I would still argue that it would not be. Do you have any other questions?
Anyone else?
Yeah, well, I'll make some comments, and because I'm not sure where we're going to go with this this evening. That's the chair's decision. So, Michael and you, Misha, referenced three elements that were of concern: the orientation, the courtyard, and the design. Objecting to the, in terms of the orientation, the 45-degree orientation, the excessiveness of the courtyard, and the amalgam, or, called amalgam design. In that order, for me, I'm less concerned about the orientation. If in fact this house was, let's say, on the lot that's labeled a preserved property and was facing Gin Lane, then I might agree with you that it should be parallel to the street. But given the configuration of this long, narrow lot, and given the configuration that there's a bit of a dog leg in there, that tucked into that corner, which happens to be behind the heir's house, which I think is compatible, and actually is at a slight angle to both Gin Lane and obviously, so Gin Lane in the front of the house, and obviously more so to Gin Lane as it bends the corner. It has to be. It's just geometry. But I don't find the orientation, given the placement of the house on the property and setback, and the meandering driveway, which I think the landscaping fits. So I'm okay with the orientation. So I don't know if that's an issue or not with the other folks. I am concerned because I think that the courtyard will be visible, meandering driveway aside, that is excessive. And my wish to the applicant would be a look at reducing the massiveness of that courtyard. As far as the design, I understand what you're saying, and if the applicant had chosen a house more like the heir's house, I think we would have probably an easier decision and it wouldn't be an issue. But they have not. I don't personally find, at least for 24 Gin Lane, and that's all I'm speaking about, the design, while I might choose to do it a bit differently, I don't find it so egregiously incompatible that that's a big issue. So for me, the biggest issue is the second point that Michael raised, which was the excessiveness of the courtyard.
That actually sounds like a happy compromise. There's a reduction in the courtyard. Is that for purposes of bedroom count, or is it specific?
I just wanted to bring to the board's attention, this is for purposes of bedroom count, number one. But number two, and the picture being worth 1,000 words, I think that Mr. Coburn's question about the size of the courtyard in relation to other homes was quite to the point. There's the Manger courtyard and parking area. You can see it. Maybe Charlie wants to zoom in. It's certainly as big, if not bigger, than the proposed 24 courtyard. See here? Also on the Manger guest house, and also on the heirs. There's a rather large circular area. Again, 2 parking areas.
Are there 2 parking areas though in the guest house?
Street, by the way.
Number one. Oh, yes, there are, right there. You can go down. You see the way the mayor's access driveway branches off, but also...
Do you want to orient real quick?
Oh, sure.
The proposed house is something like...
It's 300 feet.
It's a couple, somewhere over more than 200 feet.
It's over...
Off of Gin. And so, one of the things, because actually I thought a really great... By the way, Scott Schleifer, I thought a great question that the board asked a couple weeks ago was, it feels like you haven't listened. And so just a kind of a quick state of the union of that we hadn't made a lot of changes in the last year and a half. And so I thought it was a really good question because it's important that this process is about compromise. So just a quick state of the union, which was, the initial proposal was for the main house, which we'll get to in a bit, was a larger house at the zoned area near the water. And ultimately what we did
was keep it to 24.
Okay, so on 24, the key priority for us to make sure that we were really good neighbors was keep it way off of Gin.
300 feet from Gin.
And have it be small and out of the way. And so, since this same lot had once been approved for a 9,000 square foot home, we felt like under 5,100 was, and I had some very good conversations with my team where I negotiated against them vehemently to make it really small, everything. Fewest number of spaces, smallest footprint of pavement, and smallest house.
Are there 9 or 8 bedrooms? How many bedrooms are in the guest house? Why are there 9 parking spots? Do you know? Or how many bedrooms?
But
I just don't
The
have...
bedrooms plus you need...
One, I think.
It's a lot of
Oh,
bedrooms.
yeah.
It's 8 plus 1? Well, that's...
I don't want to speak out of...
Okay.
And so,
Let's not go there, 'cause
exactly. Well, no, I know.
It doesn't read small to me.
Well, no, but if you, I understand it doesn't
In the
read
guest
small, but,
house?
huh?
In the guest house,
No, I
correct?
understand that, but if you look at it relative to all the other, the other comparable properties, including the Mangers property, which, as I've said a couple weeks ago, I think is beautiful.
I would hope so.
I think they did an awesome job. And
It's
so,
historic.
Built in the 1800s.
well, I think it's awesome. No, I think it's awesome. And so, and the Ayers was built 2 years ago. And I think it's awesome too.
My question was the number of parking.
Right.
Was that because of the bedrooms? You said yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And it is by law.
So there are, let's just confirm, there are 8 bedrooms in that house?
In the guest, in
Because
the
I didn't hear
house,
anybody
24.
answering that.
He's looking it up, that's why.
He's looking at it.
We could look it up.
I'd rather see 1,000 square feet of gravel than another 1,000 square feet of footprint.
Thank you.
But I'd like to say...
I mean, that's what it could be. It could be another...
That's not what we're talking about.
5 bedrooms.
5 bedrooms.
5 bedrooms. So then this is, the 9-car parking lot is not a bedroom issue.
We don't ever say anything.
No, but it's appropriate.
We're talking about 24 Gin Lane. So let's, guys, let's...
Wait, it's important.
Side chat around. It's not a bedroom issue in regards to 24 Gin Lane because the applicant just said that there are 5 bedrooms, so they need 6 parking lots.
Yeah, but but are you concerned about the gravel?
Yeah, yes, I am, and I'll tell you
In
why.
relation to what? In relation to the neighborhood, which have larger gravel
Let me
driveways?
answer.
Okay, I'll tell you why. The reference to the Magnus property is one at the end of a cul-de-sac. It's the end of a drive. So it's not visible from Gin Lane at all.
Neither is this.
You're right that Charlie Ayers' house has a lot of gravel. I'm not looking to make things worse by doing something that's comparable. So if you have the ability, because it's not determined by the code, that you have to have 9 parking lots, my wish would be that you could reduce the parking area to that which is required by the code, which if you have 5 bedrooms, then it's 6.
If I may
It would just be a reduction.
You think
And
it's
as
a lot
Curtis said
smaller?
initially, excuse me, let me just finish. As Curtis said initially, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounded like before we started talking about what was required or not, that perhaps a reduction in that gravel space would be a nice compromise. So I'm asking you to consider that, which would be a reduction of from 9 spots to 6 spots, and a commensurate reduction in the gravel.
Let me respond. First of all, as you're well aware, this lot was approved for a house of over 4,000 square feet more on a resolution from this board that has no durational limit and could be executed on immediately. Okay? So this is a 5,066 square foot house on a lot that you have already approved a house of over 9,000 square feet on. It also, in terms of your jurisdiction, this lot is 300 square feet from Gin Lane, and when you look at your jurisdiction, which was one of the reasons why the certificate of appropriateness was granted for the demo permit, Fairleigh is a private road, so the views from Fairleigh are not part of your jurisdiction. I know people wish it were, and even there was some movement to change the village code, but as we stand now, the views in from Fairleigh are not part of your historic jurisdiction. I'm sure your council will inform you that, which was actually part of the reason why the demolition approval was so easy to grant. 300 feet from Gin Lane, and on 24 we'll show you, or we can show you now if you'd like, the fact that this is not, let's show you, this is not visible. This house is not going to be visible because as a request of that Mr. Rawlings' request, on 28, we took yet another series of photographs. But this is helpful for this.
John,
yes?
You reduced 2 spaces. Would everyone be happy?
It's in at Holland. I don't know if Ed had a...
I'm asking.
We went through a really long process.
I'm sure you did, Mr. Schleifer.
And it took a really long time. And we tried to make it as small. And Ed went crazy with how few spots there were.
We can take 2
But what, honestly, I don't care so much about this, but 9 parking spaces seems excessive.
Take 2 spaces.
Take 2 spots away.
It doesn't make any sense to me that you think that that's not a lot of parking spots, because I think it is for a 5-bedroom house, that's all.
I don't have a problem with taking
That's the
2
least of
away.
the issues.
That's the least of the issues? Are there other issues on 24?
Do it. I, just for the record, have no issue with the application as it stands. I didn't have that issue with the application prior. I listened to the presentation. There were a lot of really respectful and reasonable things that were discussed. I don't think they're really germane to this particular application. Right now, having that conversation with a board member who seems to be on the fence, and if 2 parking spaces make that a reasonable suggestion for us to move forward further, it just seems like we're horse trading, but let's just...
That's fine. It's okay.
I think it's reasonable.
So what I'd like the board to do is to close this matter for written submission only, because there really is, we can respond in writing, they can respond to anything else they have in writing. No one's going to get any advantage. Close it for written decision, for written submission only. No one's going to get an advance to see anybody's submissions beforehand. This has been going on for some time. I don't understand at all why the board would be hesitant to do that on a lot that already had approval for 5,000.
A new survey would probably be part of the file showing this parking. And Jeff, would you be, okay, so if part of that conversation is if we were to close for written decision, it would be subject to
written submission.
For 10 days.
Yeah, I'm not trying to get you to say what date you'd approve it. I'm just saying I think you should close it.
I was actually talking to the board. I was just speaking specifically to the board. That you can hold over for 10 days for both written and the subject to. Council, do you have any objection to that?
I don't see any problem with
We
that.
have,
Okay, I know, I just want to ask what the board's mindset was.
I don't want to...
after I hear what they have to say, then we can talk about it. How's that?
Well, they already had what they had to say.
I know, but you know what? I have to let them say what they want to say, and you'll probably come to some kind of so what? He's had his say too. This is the purpose of a public meeting. Let's just get it on with it. Thank you.
Jeff, co-counsel for the Mangers and the Michael Chicks. First of all, I'm hearing again from John Bennett that we don't have jurisdiction because the views from Fairleigh don't count. That's a misstatement of what's in the law. It's clearly to the extent that the property is visible from a public street or other right-of-way, that's what triggers your jurisdiction. The claim that you don't have jurisdiction to consider that is wrong. It's the same type of claim that they used in the last round to tell you couldn't look at the size of the building. The second thing is this. There's no rush. There's no rush to close this hearing. Tonight we presented 2 experts. They haven't even given you their written reports. You heard anecdotal comments from John Bennett pointing out parking areas at, this house and that's bigger and this one's bigger, and therefore the parking area is fine. We haven't sorted those facts out. I want the dimensions on those things. You should have the dimensions on those things. I'd like to look at his plans and see how many bedrooms he has, how many other extra rooms are in there that the Suffolk County Department of Health Services counts as bedrooms. Let's get the facts and take some time to look this over. This record is not ready to close tonight. The other thing is, although I think it was proper and appropriate to split the applications up into 2, there's no question that although the building lots are single and separate, there's no question that there is some synergy between the 2 buildings. And we've got, we would like to have an opportunity to not only, and I think it was a good decision to divide them in 2, because it's the first time really that the board and ourselves had the focus on 24 individually as a project. But there is this interaction between the 2 buildings, and I think it's a mistake to artificially segment the 2 applications as if they have nothing to do with each other. You haven't yet heard tonight our comments on 28. They also involve some facts and figures about relative sizes that I think you should digest, and we may want to make some arguments about how these 2 buildings interact together. And you only have heard the introduction tonight from these 2 authorities on historic preservation. So my suggestion is, let's take a deep breath here so that we know what we're talking about. I don't want to talk about parking areas that are bigger and smaller based on the comment of an attorney who stands up and says, see, from that photo it's bigger. Let's get it dimensioned. Let's get the real issues here. What's the hurry? Why is this such a hurry? The fact that this plan was presented and that we find ourselves here today is not our fault, as I told you the last time we were here. It's the fact that the board was misled away from what the law was that they were supposed to look at. So my request would be, if they have no more comments on 24, let us bring back Michael Goldblum. He has a presentation on 28. And then let's adjourn, and we can give you the written reports, and then we can have an opportunity to discuss the way these buildings really interact with each other on the 2 different sites. I see, Mr. Coburn, you're impatient to tell me something, so
I don't want to be accused of trying to rush anything. I came to the December 10th hearing here prepared to discuss the architecture, and I understand all the concerns, and I got that. At that discussion, it was requested to adjourn, not to the 14th, but to the 28th of January. It's 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 6 weeks at least. And we were told on December 10th that we would have that. So I went back to the file and reviewed it all again. I'm not rushing anything. I want to be prepared every meeting. We came to the January 28th meeting. We heard nothing substantive on 24. I'm not rushing anything. I've been prepared for more than 2 months on this file. So I'm not rushed, but I don't want to be accused. I'm not trying to rush anything. I don't want to be accused of rushing it. I've been pretty patient. I think we all have.
I just want to be able to nail some of these facts down. There are too many instances when council gets up and sort of says anecdotally, oh, that's bigger, that's smaller, look at the parking space there. We do not make decisions on that basis.
But you're treating us like a courtroom, with all due respect. We don't weigh everything, with all due respect to John and to you, we don't weigh things with quite the weight that a court might when a lawyer says it. We'll weigh it, we'll think about it. Some of them resonate, some of them don't. We're focused on the architecture.
Well, you're also focused on size and the size of these
structures.
Part of
the architecture. It's part of the architecture, yeah.
And size is an issue that is an overriding issue in this case. It applies to the area of the parking that's in the guest house, and all I'm saying is let's get it dimensioned and compare it to the other parking areas that Mr. Bennett was talking about.
Are we allowed to disagree with your assessment?
Sure.
Okay, I mean, that's what we've been trying to say. We understand you, we've heard you, we've listened. No one's impatient, no one's trying to rush the application on. We have been here time and time again to hear it, as Mr. Colburn has said. The board as a whole independently have their own idea of how to proceed, move forward. Can they speak independently about what their idea is, and then...
Sure, you can speak independently. I'm just saying, let's get the facts. You know, this is not a courtroom, but we should have facts, not comments. Well, for example, Mr. Bennett just stood up and said, look at the parking area on the Manger property. That's bigger.
But Mr. Bragg, you don't have to look at the park, what Mr. Bennett says.
Since I brought this up, maybe, let me interject here. We resolved the issue of bedrooms, okay, that it's not, the parking spaces are on that property are not determined by the number of bedrooms. So we've got that fact taken care of, and it's a non-issue.
We have the plans.
Jeff, please, Jeff, please. Okay. So we've resolved that fact. Okay, it's not a bedroom issue. It's a size issue, it's a perception issue, it's a judgment issue. I don't really give a whit of care whether it compares proportionately or otherwise to any of the other properties. I only care about the scaling of the structure and the layout. And to me, whatever the proportion is to the Mangers, to the heirs, or whatever, isn't going to change my decision or my willingness now and my acceptance of the fact that they're going to reduce the parking spaces by 8. So another 2 weeks, I'm sorry, by 2.
And if there's two bigger ones, we'll take out the biggest ones.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, the chair has suggested closing it.
I haven't, Mr. Bennett.
I'm not the chair.
Mr. Bennett suggested.
Oh, okay.
I think it's a good suggestion.
I may have mentioned it privately to you.
Okay, well, I would be okay with the suggestion that we close it for written submission, because I think we've heard all the facts. You've got 10 days to submit something. The applicant has 10 days to submit something. We'll have a chance to read it, and if it differs significantly from what our current feelings are, we can respond at that point. But I don't think holding another public hearing, in all due respect, is going to move us any more forward and would have the consequence of delaying not only this property, but the other property, and I think we will all be disturbed by that.
Well, we want to move forward on 28, and I do think there's going to be some interaction and probably some comment after we start discussing 28 that involves or implicates the other property. I mean, it's, you know, the plan is presented as a guest house, and I wanted to add this, although it is on a single and separate lot. I mean, the design here that is suggested is that it is a dependent structure based on the larger house on the other lot. So I do think that that's a fair means of analyzing it. Despite the fact that it could be sold at some later point in time.
We've already agreed.
Presenting it in that way.
I'm sorry. And Susan, don't let me put words in your mouth, but we've already agreed to bifurcate the properties. At the same time, we fully understand that they are co-owned and that they are all part of a whole. But we agreed some time ago, over objections and acceptances, that we would separate the two. That's where we are.
No, I was with you on that. I'm not objecting to that. I'm just saying, I think we may want to come back. There may be some interaction between the two that we want to talk about.
I don't think that any of us are oblivious to the fact that the two properties are related. But to hold up one for the sake of the other at this point, 2 years into the process, is not to the benefit of all parties. From my perspective, the other board members may have a different perspective.
We're not 2 years into the process. We're two meetings into a new process because
I understand.
Because the board got
3 years.
But
the board detoured away from the law.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
No ancient history. We are in a new hearing. We have heard from both you and the applicant. I think you've had, and I think it's been very interesting, and I honestly do believe that if we closed for written decision, that because not written decision, for written comments, that what we had asked for just now is the written comments of the two experts. We are able to read, all five of us, and if we felt uncomfortable, we could reopen it, which I think is probably unlikely, but it is not unheard of. And it would be more reasonable to try to at least move forward on 24. I would also say that from my perspective, the separation of the two properties is as simple as, under the law, those are two separate properties. And therefore, conjoining them in a public meeting would seem to me to be a mistake, because as was stated, someone could at some time sell off one of these houses, and then they wouldn't be conjoined. They would no longer be related to each other in ownership. And therefore, it makes more sense to do it per the law, that this is separate, unless you want to conjoin the properties. I was once in a situation like this, and that was the choice. We could either build a place that you could live in on the second property, or we could have them together, which would be a big financial mistake, which I'm sure Mr. Schleifer wouldn't be interested in, no one would be. So I do think that it would be reasonable to close this for written submission, and I hope that your experts will speedily provide their commentary, which I thought was very interesting and had some perspectives I hadn't considered, actually, so that we could move forward. But we are ready to listen to 28 Gin Lane.
Okay, well, we're ready to
So
proceed.
do I have to, I make a resolution to, motion to close the meeting for written submission?
October 21st, is that 10 days?
Whatever you like.
Is that reasonable?
10 days, more?
Whatever you like.
When's the next meeting? 12 days? It doesn't matter to me.
Madam Chair, there's a comment from the public.
I'm sorry, I thought that we would have a chance the next time
Well, then you
as well.
please step forward. And state your name, please.
Lynn Manger, 10 Fairley. But I'm actually speaking for Donald Quinton, who's in London. He lives and works in London. And although Mr. Bennett read part of his letter, he didn't read the part with the very long overhang roof, which I'm sorry you won't address, because that's what he looks at, is the very deep roof from his house. But his other concern, if you can see this.
See, we can see it up there really well.
Okay. Is you drive in this way to the master house. You drive in this way past the front to the second house. This house is now surrounded by driveway because it goes on both sides, which is very unusual in this historic area, that any house is surrounded by driveway. Now, granted, one is going to a different house, but it's bifurcating his property between the house and the tennis court, so that anyone sitting on the deck looking at the tennis court has got this driveway that goes in between with cars that have access to this house. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to suggest that this driveway, which goes this way to the front door, I'm sure, sorry, but can you, am I doing this right for you all to see?
You're doing a good job.
If you do this, you can bring this around, pass by here, perhaps shorten this parking a bit on this way so that it's not quite as heavy, come this way and join this side so that this could be eliminated and he's not looking out his deck to the tennis court.
But it's his choice.
I understand that. I'm making a suggestion so that the house is not surrounded by gravel parking lots and driveways, which it is now, which is definitely not historic. So I'm trying to make a suggestion which might eliminate some of the appearance of gravel everywhere, as opposed to perhaps lawn or trees or bushes or whatever. In any case, And I realize that he has this house on the angle, and perhaps he didn't realize that this side now is in the north, and it's not going to get any of the sun until very late in the afternoon. If he were to flip the house and put his porch over here, he'll have a nice morning sun. But that's just would be my preference. And I'm just going to say that if you could consider any way of changing the peak of the roof so it doesn't have to drop to the first floor, I know that neighbors on the east side would appreciate it, because that's what they look at, the roof. Thank you.
I was just going to build on what Curtis was saying. You're right. It's Mr. Schleifer's choice if he wants to have the meandering driveway go meander around the backyard. But the prior owners, the McKnights, did in fact have a grass driveway with, and I don't know if they had anything underneath it, but they drove on the grass. So if you want green space, that grass can handle it. But again, it's his choice. That's his choice.
Please step forward if you have something more to say, Mr. Handler.
Yes, thank you.
Go to the microphone, please.
Yes, Richard Handler, thank you very much for the board's patience. Two things. One, as far as the applicant's choice, this board has the final determination with respect to design, placement, siting, and so on. And I respectfully submit that if there's something about the layout, design, architecture, notwithstanding the applicant's choice, this board has the power to reject it outright and certainly to make recommendations to the applicant for a change. So yes, the plan is his choice, and I understand the emotion of it, and it's a fair statement, but in the end, the ultimate approval lay with this board, and the board is not bound to the applicant's choice. So thank you for that. As far as closing the hearing is concerned, this board's about to hear at least two major portions of a response regarding 28. And I'm wondering what would happen if the hearing is closed and this board hears compelling testimony, evidence, position, opinion that would suggest that the design of 28 be changed. What impact will that have on the design of 24 in the event that this hearing is closed? And may I respectfully suggest that the board at least hold off the determination of closing that hearing until it's heard the response of the objectants to 28, because if it closes off the hearing and indeed this board feels that change is necessary with respect to 28, that now leaves 24 to be finally decided based as it is, and the board may be cutting off its options to deliberate on 24 by closing the hearing at this point.
It seems to me that there are pros and cons to handling the two together apart, and that's I know a bridge we crossed a long time ago. One of the cons will be if we were to move forward on 24 and then come to 28 and have a concern about the compatibility, it might indicate that we want changes or have issues with 28. That's the impact. I think that's the answer to your question, is that at that point 24 is set in stone, so to speak, and it's a property we will have to take into account in determining appropriateness and compatibility for 28. And that could be a limitation, and it could be a concern. So I think it will be part of the deliberations, but that's, I think, an outcome of the construct that everyone agreed to over some objections from the beginning. Is that fair?
Yeah. I don't know where you're going with that. I don't understand it. Yes, they're
two separate.
I'm just saying it may make
They are two separate decisions,
Yes, they
and they were before, by the way.
Well,
so
we were instructed to treat them as two separate things.
That's right, because they're two separate properties.
So we're not going to decide on one and then go change it, because
we could reopen. Is that not the case, Mr. Robinson? Can't we reopen it if we really? I just think it'll be the written. I don't think there's more like testimony that's coming forward. So it would seem to me that other testimony could be in writing. And therefore there would be sort of a definitive closure. It's not completely closed. If the board members felt, who knows what's going to be said next, that there was a reason why we should reopen it, we have that prerogative, I believe. So I'm not averse to closing it, but allowing written commentary for the next, till, what was the date?
21st, I think, 10 days.
For 10 days.
I know that there are a series of letters of objections from neighbors. There were neighbors who were planning to attend and to submit letters of objection.
We've read them.
But there are the others that have been sent to us. We were
Well, then they
concerned.
can be put in the written
Sure.
record.
That's the question.
Because people, honestly, Mr. Handler, if someone isn't here to testify, they have to put it in writing. They can't call us, they can't email us. I spend most of my time fighting off people who are trying to contact me for all kinds of things. And I have to just act like I'm deaf and dumb, which is fine. But it would be good if they wrote it down, and they have 10 days to send it and submit it to the file
So
in
the
an orderly
submissions are
fashion.
available for not only the reports of the experts, but also
For everything.
the public to submit.
You can write, Mr. Bennett can write, anyone can put something into the file, enter it into the file. It's only closed for testimony, and it could be reopened if down the road tonight there's some, or if we're continuing 28 at another meeting, I don't know, that there's a glitch. But I feel that it is, we have basically heard everything that's going to be said on 24, which seems to me to be reasonable to close it, except for written commentary.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is the board in agreement on this?
Yeah, it's just a matter of how many days, that's all.
Well, someone else, yes. I'd like to make a motion that we close the application of 24 Gin Lane, except for written commentary until February 21st. Put into the folder in the building department by anyone and everyone who wants to comment.
Second?
Aye.
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 So moved. I'm sorry, I can't hear. I've lost my voice and my hearing. Go ahead. What? 28.
Should we go?
Yes.
Sure. You want to, I would just like to get some water.
Oh, wait, you know what? Let's have 5 minutes. Do I have a motion to recess for 5 minutes?
Second.
Aye. Great, thanks. 5 minutes. So at 9:29, we're reconvening.